Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me today. My name is Nick from CanadianSportsbooks.com. How are you doing this morning?
Great, and thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
That's awesome. I'm really excited for the interview as well. So, again, thanks a lot for taking the time today. For those that don't know, Posluszny was one of the greatest linebackers of his generation. At Penn State, he was a two-time Chuck Bednarik Award winner. He also won the Dick Butkus Award, which is given to the nation's top defensive player. He went on to play 11 NFL seasons for the Bills and Jaguars, recording 1,200 tackles, 15 sacks, and 14 interceptions, while establishing himself as one of the best leaders in the NFL. I'm a huge fan, so it's a pleasure to meet you and an honor to chat. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. My confidence level just went sky high after that. So thank you.
Well, let's get right into it then. The Bills came into the year as odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl and improved to 5-1 with the win over the Kansas City Chiefs last week. You were drafted by the Bills in the second round of the 2006 NFL Draft and played 4 seasons in Buffalo. What's impressed you the most about Buffalo's emergence as one of the top teams in the NFL?
I'll tell you what, they look so good right now, especially like you mentioned after that last win against Kansas City. The fact that they've been able to transition to have such great success and so fast, right? Quarterbacks playing well. Defensively, they look great. They play fast and aggressive on defense. And just the fact from a coaching standpoint, they've been able to combine all these pieces together and get everybody to work together and play together and almost in a short period of time. It's been very impressive to watch. They're an exciting team.
Yeah, Sean McDermott's really changed the culture in Buffalo. Do you have the Bills winning the Super Bowl? And if not, who do you think has the best chance to win Super Bowl 50?
I was gonna say it's going to be hard to bet against them, especially when you think about coming out of the AFC, it's them and Kansas City, right? Or the two that we would say the two top teams in that realm. And the way that they competed against Kansas City last Sunday was so impressive that you have to be able to say, okay, Buffalo is definitely needs to be at the top of that list for sure.
Yeah, for sure. With the way the Bills have started, do you think Josh Allen will win MVP this year?
And he's definitely a front runner right now, right? I mean, he's playing at such a high level, and it's so impressive to watch him play because the way he can move, how big his size. I mean, I played middle linebacker in the NFL, and I look at him and I say, geez, he'd be a tough guy to tackle, because of the way he moves and his size and the way he can escape the pocket. So seeing him perform the way that he is right now, it's very impressive. And I would say he is definitely, again, at the top of that list.
Yeah, he's one of the more physical running quarterbacks in the NFL compared to Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts. How many Super Bowl rings do you think Josh Allen will end up with when his career is over?
That's your guess is as good as mine there. But I'll tell you what, if they can keep that core group of guys together in Buffalo, and like you said, Coach McDermott has done such a great job of building a foundation, building a culture where you can consistently improve and get better and bring guys in that automatically buy into the way that they do things. There's no reason why they can't have success for many years to come.
Speaking of bringing guys in, actually, Buffalo was recently linked to star running back Christian McCaffrey. With Carolina listening to offers, do you think the Bills should acquire McCaffrey? And do you think the Bills need a star running back to compete for the Lombardi Trophy?
It is an interesting move. Obviously, there's the relationship there from Coach McDermott was with McCaffrey in Carolina. But whenever you look at teams that have continued success, not only they so an outstanding quarterback that can do things like Josh Allen can, but to add a dynamic running back to really be able to stretch the field from both a passing standpoint, but then have a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. He creates many challenges for NFL defenses. So he would absolutely be an additional asset for that team.
Yeah, obviously, I think McCaffrey could help just about any team in the NFL. His issue's been more staying on the field than anything. Let's move on to another one of your former teams, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags dropped 3 straight to fall to 3rd place in the AFC South. How do you think Jacksonville can turn its season around?
One game at a time. Honestly, they're in a position where we've seen great flashes of success, right? Where all these new pieces are starting to come together, where the quarterback's playing well. Head coach Doug Peterson has done a great job of kind of changing the environment, especially coming out of the season that was last year in Jacksonville. And really, change comes one game at a time. Now, it's almost like you need to get that winning feeling, right? And then continue to improve and go from there and get better and improve and go from there. And when you look at their roster and the talent that they have, you say that there's no reason why they can't have success. Now, a lot of things have to go right as well. You have to stay healthy and execute well. But I think the future is still very positive for Jacksonville.
The Jags are 2-4, I believe. How do you rate the job that Doug Peterson has done thus far?
I think when you look at the environment that he walked into with the situation that was last season, he comes into a situation where a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes going on, and he's a head coach that was able to bring immediate stability, immediate credibility, where he can walk in and say, okay, this is the way we're going to do things from now on. And the fact that the players have really supported him and bought into that, I think that speaks volumes about Coach. He's done a outstanding job of kind of building the foundation for what he wants the organization to look like in the future. Now, like you said, they're 2-4 right now. And everybody in Jacksonville wants them to be better than that. And they will continue to improve for sure. And like I said, I think with the job that he's done and the way that he does things, the command presence that he has and the way that the guys respond to him, I think everybody's very impressed with him.
I think he brought in a great staff as well in Jacksonville, which has definitely helped Trevor Lawrence make some strides in year 2. Jacksonville enters week 7 favored by 3 points over the 5-1 New York Giants. Does this line surprise you? And how big of an advantage is home field in the NFL?
It is. When I saw that line and said, okay, Jacksonville's coming off of 3 straight losses and the New York Giants look really good right now. So that was interesting. But I mean, obviously I'm going to support the Jaguars through and through. But now when you talk about home field advantage, it can be significant. It can be significant, especially at certain points of the year when you're going to have the fan support. You're playing at home, your family's there. The atmosphere of being at home, it definitely can change things for sure.
Yeah, I think it's big in the trenches as well with the linemen having to hear the calls and that sort of thing. Jacksonville selected Trayvon Walker from Georgia with the number 1 overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. Walker moved to outside linebacker in the Jaguars' 3-4 scheme. You also moved from a 4-3 to a 3-4 in Jacksonville. What do you think of Walker's performance thus far, and how much of a challenge is it to move from a 4-3 to a 3-4?
It can be, and that's the thing. So those two questions together, you look at how he's played. We've seen unbelievable flashes, right? And you say, okay, this is the reason why he was the top pick for the Jaguars. Now that coupled with the transition from, at least for me, changing from doing things a very specific and very certain way in a 4-3 and then trying to transition over to a 3-4, it can be a challenge. So I think as we continue to watch him, the biggest thing is, do we see him improve throughout the year? Do we see him consistently getting better, learning more, understanding the defense more, and getting more comfortable? Because that's when I think he's really going to shine. I mean, he's the ceiling is limitless for him, right? With his abilities, his talent, the way he can move, and his energy level. So it's going to be exciting to see. He just needs to continue to learn and adapt to the NFL. But he's an exciting player to watch. That's for sure. And I think he's going to be an outstanding player for the Jaguars for many years.
Yeah, he's got obviously a sack and an interception already, so showing you part of his all-around game. During your time in Jacksonville, the front office prioritized building on defense and on defense during the draft and free agency. It seems the organization's taking a similar approach now, despite having a generational quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Do you think the Jaguars have held Lawrence back by not giving him enough weapons on offense?
I think when you look at what he has surrounding him right now, obviously, so you have your franchise quarterback, right? Are you able to protect him? When you look at the tackles, you say, yeah, they're right and left tackles. You say, okay, these are guys that are very solid players that can protect our franchise guy. And then I feel like they've done a great job of putting individual pieces around him to give him the targets that he needs to have success. Now, like you said, I mean, they could have obviously gone offensive heavy, right? And pick some other different weapons for him to have access to. But when you look at building out the composition of a team and everything that's needed, number one, so you have your franchise quarterback, you have people that can protect him. You want to be able to build out a strong defense to support that as well. And then also give the quarterback the weapons that he needs to have success on offense. So I think piece by piece, they're doing a great job of putting that puzzle together so that they can have long-term success.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe they've done a great job as well. And as you know, Trevor Lawrence was a number 1 overall pick and has the potential to be a great quarterback. As a middle linebacker, you went up against 2 of the best NFL quarterbacks of all time, in Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Did you do anything differently to prepare for those matchups during the week? Talk a bit about the difference in preparation for a guy like Manning or Brady compared to a typical game.
With those guys in particular, and there's some other quarterbacks that I would add to that list. Phillip Rivers was another one. Drew Brees was another one, where you knew when you were playing those guys, they had such a great understanding of the defense that we were running that if we didn't make small adjustments with our movements, our alignments, that they would know exactly what we were in at all times, which is a horrible situation for the defense to be in, right? Where the quarterback can just walk up to the line of scrimmage and say, okay, Posluszny's the line at 6 yards. They're in cover 2. I know exactly what I'm going to do. That's what you want to avoid. So when we would play those types of elite quarterbacks who had such a great understanding of the game, we knew that we would have to stem our alignments just a little bit differently. We'd have to disguise our coverages just a little bit more in order to make it challenging for them. And that was, it was always hard to do, like I said, because their experience level, how they understood the game. But that was the biggest change in preparation, just being able to find small little ways, small little adjustments that we could make to help to make the quarterback's reads more challenging.
So during your time in Jacksonville, Robert Saleh was a linebackers coach. He's now the head coach of the New York Jets, and the Jets are 4-2 through 6 games. What do you think of the job that he's done in New York for a Jets franchise that has had just 1 winning season in the last decade?
Unbelievable. Can't speak highly enough about Coach Saleh. He was an outstanding linebacker coach. And that was the thing. When he was our linebacker coach, we could see the way that he had command of the room, the way that he was able to teach us. We said, okay, unfortunately, we know he's not going to be a linebacker coach for very long. He had those type of capabilities, and he just had that presence and his leadership. It was infectious. So to see him have success early on with the New York Jets, it's awesome. Just so happy for him. Because number one, he's an outstanding person, right? He's an outstanding person that does things the right way and is helping this franchise grow and perform the right way. So he's very easy to cheer for. Let's put it that way. But he has done an outstanding job with the Jets.
Yeah, I'm a 49ers fan, actually, so I got to know Saleh a little bit up close and personal by watching the Niners over the last few years. And obviously, I think he's a great coach as well. Speaking of linebackers, who do you believe is the best linebacker in the NFL right now?
The fact that you just mentioned San Fran, I really, really love watching Fred Warner for San Fran. I think he's unbelievable. And when I think of middle linebackers, I think of the pure, 4-3 guy that lines up in the middle of the field. So to me, he's on that list. And then I think of guys that have been around for a long time, that have played at a high level for many years. So Eric Kendricks comes to mind from Minnesota, Bobby Wagner with the LA Rams, guys that have played at a high level for a long period of time. And those are guys that are fun to watch because of the way they play the game, the way it's exciting to watch them play because they can do it all, right? They're great in coverage. Obviously, they're great stopping the run. They play fast and aggressive. So those are guys I love to watch.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a feeling Bobby Wagner was going to end up on that list. Moving on to your alma mater, Penn State plays one of its biggest rivals on Saturday. The Nittany Lions find themselves as 5-point favorites at home against Minnesota in Beaver Stadium. You went 2-1 versus Minnesota as a player. What does Penn State have to do to cover the spread, and do you have them winning on Saturday?
I'm always going to have Penn State winning, that's for sure. But then, I mean, when you look at Minnesota, I say, and the way that Penn State matches up against them, thinking about the traditional Minnesota, obviously always stopping the run comes first, right? With the way that they their offense is distributed, the way that they move the ball throughout the field, stopping the run comes first. And I think if with the Penn State defense can do that, play well offensively. When I say play well, I mean play smart, protect the football, make great decisions with the football. I think they should be in a good spot for a victory.
Cool. And obviously they're 5-1 coming off a loss versus Michigan. Penn State head coach James Franklin landed on a list of the most overrated college coaches earlier this year. How do you rate the job he's done at Penn State so far?
When you think about head coaches at the college ranks right now, it's probably never been more difficult to be a head football coach at a major college program. When you think of all the challenges that they faced that they didn't have to years ago, transfer portal, name, image, and likeness situations, and how that's being used as a recruiting tool. So when you look at Coach Franklin and say, okay, he's been able to come into Penn State where there was still some volatility left over, and some uncertainty. He's been able to recruit outstanding players, get most of them to, get the vast majority of them to be committed to Penn State football. And we look at where they're at right now. I mean, they did obviously have a tough loss against Michigan, but they're competitive every week. They're playing well. They're playing smart. I mean, I think Coach Franklin has done an unbelievable job with Penn State football. It's as a former Penn Stater and a guy that bleeds blue and white. It's great to see because he has so much. You could tell he has so much love for Penn State football, for the university, everything that football means, and for the state of Pennsylvania. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah, he's obviously brought in some great players over the years as well. Saquon Barkley, Micah Parsons, guys like that have made big splashes in the NFL. As you know, Penn State is widely considered as linebacker U. Your legacy played a huge role in earning that distinction. Is there a Penn State linebacker that you've been impressed with this season, or a player that you believe is next in line to carry the tradition?
Man, that's a good question. I think, when I watch those guys, it seems like they have such a good group right now that it's almost like at any moment, one of them can make a splash play and look outstanding. So I would say overall, they're a very talented linebacker core. It seems like they have a lot of depth where there are multiple players that can play at a high level for them. So it'll be interesting to watch them progress throughout the season in the next couple of years to see if somebody can become the next Micah Parsons. I mean, when we look at him and what he's doing in the NFL, it's so impressive. I was talking to another former All-American and All-Pro Penn State linebacker, Sean Lee. He was with the Dallas Cowboys, and I said, tell me about Micah Parsons. He said, never seen a player with his size, his athleticism, and his speed at the linebacker position that can rush the passer like he does, but also then line up 4 yards off the ball and play true linebacker. So he is so exciting to watch. He's changed the position.
You were also a great Penn State linebacker, by the way. So we could say, who could be the next Paul Posluszny as well.
I don't fit in that category. I don't think.
You spent 3 years in the Big Ten. Which opposing Big Ten stadium was the toughest college football atmosphere to play in?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I'll tell you what, the one that immediately comes to mind is going when you play at Wisconsin. Camp Randall Stadium in the fourth quarter when they play jump around, and the whole stadium goes nuts, and it's rocking. You can feel, it's almost like you can feel the ground moving beneath your feet. That was always a tough place to play, a very exciting place to play, but you could tell that they love football. They love the Wisconsin Badgers, and it always made it a very exciting but hostile environment to play in.
Yeah, I'll have to visit there one day. I live right across the border from Michigan, so I've been to the big house.
Mm-hmm.
It's been exciting, but I'll have to put that one on the list.
Yeah, that'll be a great place to visit.
You were one of the toughest players of your era. How has the perception of concussions and head injuries changed since you last played in 2017?
I think, I mean, hopefully I'm correct in saying it's only gotten better, in a sense that you think about when I first got into the NFL, concussions were something that you were still at the point, and this is 2007, where you kind of shrugged them off and went back in the game. Now, go to them when I was in my last few years in the NFL, we started to truly understand the significance of concussions, where if a guy got a head injury on the field, he came out and all of his players were supportive of that, knowing that head injuries are something we no longer mess with, right? It's a very serious thing, and it's not something to tough it out, right? And I think the awareness of that and the simple knowledge of that, where guys truly understand now that head injuries are not something that you can just to use the football terms, hey, just suck it up and get back out there. They don't do that anymore, and they shouldn't. So I think we are continually heading in the right direction when it comes to treating head injuries, treating concussions, and understanding the significance of them.
That brings me to my next question, actually. In your era, it seemed more like a badge of honor to play hurt. You once played with a torn pectoral muscle, I believe. Looking back at the Tua Tagovailoa incident, do you think enough is being done to protect players from serious injuries?
I think that's something that we can always get better at, right? And it's something that, as long as there are circumstances that are going to happen, and we need to be able to say, as players, coaches, and as an NFL, say, okay, well, how do we improve this? How do we ensure that situation doesn't happen again? But then also be proactive and say, how can we improve things for the future? Because we all want the game of football to continue, right? But and we want let's be honest, the violent aspect of the game, which is so important to it, to continue as well. But you want people to be able to compete in an environment where they know the risks going in, but they also know that they're protected, and there's procedures in place to make sure that this is a violent game, but we're going to do everything we can to do it right, to do it safely, and to keep football as the game that we all love.
So, excuse me, I was looking back through NFL injury reports. And as far as I could tell, you were only officially diagnosed with one concussion during your NFL career. Looking back, do you believe you played through concussion symptoms at times? And if so, how many?
Thankfully, I have a very hard head, so I only have that one. But I mean, I think, looking back, especially early in my career, were things that are now maybe labeled as a concussion. Did we fight through it? Probably. But that's simply that I feel like the progression of players and coaches and trainers understanding the significance of it. At that point, like we said, it was something that you just kind of fought through, and then we got smarter about it and understood the significance of it, and then we put procedures in place so that that's no longer the issue. So when I think about it, yeah, did we see a positive progression? Absolutely, and as long as that continues, we'll be on the right path.
So when a potential head injury occurs, like the Tua Tagovailoa incident, how much of the onus is on the players to remove themselves from the game compared to the coaches and the medical staff?
I mean, obviously, I think from a medical perspective, they have to be so on point to realize that they're there to protect the players, to keep them safe. I mean, and look after their health and well-being. Because for the guys on the field, you want to compete, right? And you never want to leave. You never want to. It's always so challenging. The worst part about getting hurt is knowing that you're leaving the field and your brothers that you compete with are still out there, and you want to be able to stay with them. But from a player's perspective and a teammate's perspective, understanding that injuries are part of the game, and you have to be so supportive of teammates to be able to say, if you get hurt, you have to come out for the benefit of your long-term health and for the benefit of the team, really. So it's everybody. Everybody's involved in that decision to understand that, yes, this is a highly competitive environment, but the health and safety of the players still needs to come first.
So there have been quite a few controversial roughing the passer penalties called in recent weeks. What's your take on how the roughing the passer penalty is being called in 2022?
It's such a challenge, right? And especially from a defensive guy, I look at it and say, man, this is changing the outcome of games. Drives that should have ended are now being extended another series because of a call, and that's the part that makes you a little bit frustrated. Where you're saying, I don't know if those calls should be able to change, to have such a significant impact on the outcome of games, because that changes everything, right? So it's such a fine line, because there are quarterbacks that you want to be able to protect, and rightfully so, but the game still needs to be extremely competitive, and it needs to be fair, and in the simplest sense, where to have a call, to have an official make a call that has an enormous impact, an outsized impact on a potential outcome of a game, that's challenging for players to accept.
Definitely. And there's been a few instances for sure where you've kind of thought, well, what do you expect the guy to do, the defensive player to do? I think Chris Jones had a sack fumble the other day that was called roughing the passer, and he braced himself from the fall, and he did everything possible as a defensive player to protect the quarterback, but obviously still had it called against him. Do you believe that too many of the rule changes have been geared towards protecting only offensive players?
When you look at I don't have the stats, but when you look at them, the simple answer is yes. And just like you said, it's putting all the emphasis on making the defenders adjust. And like you said, you can have a guy that's trying to do the right thing. You can only hit guys in certain areas, and you got to remember, these are men that are running at full speed, trying to play fast and aggressive. And then you say, well, but I got to target this area, and I have to stay away from his head, and I have to stay for. You end up putting in all of these constraints that make it harder and harder for defenders to be able to play the game that it's the way that it's supposed to be played, and that can be challenging. So there needs to be some sort of balance where the game is still the game of football that we all love, where the players are protected, but I would say a balance of the risks associated with putting additional constraints on defenders and saying what they can and can't do in protecting offensive players.
I definitely agree. I think it's very tough to be a defender in this day and age. Moving back to your time in Jacksonville, your first defensive coordinator was Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker is now the coach of the Michigan State Spartans, one of Penn State's biggest rivals in the Big Ten. Did you give Tucker any advice when he took the job?
I said congratulations, Tim, because it's such for him. I mean, when he was a defensive coordinator for us, he was outstanding. We loved him to death. He was one of those guys that, as your defensive coordinator, you would do anything for. So to be able to see him lead a group of young men at the college level it's awesome. It's great for college football. It's great for those players. Now, there's always going to be, one Saturday every fall where I'm going to cheer against him, when he's playing the Nittany Lions. But for the rest of them, I am fully supportive of him because he's such a great person. And I know he does an outstanding job of leading those young men and helping them develop into, great football players and great student athletes.
I thought he was a great hire too. Speaking of college football, you were one of the best college football players of your generation, as I mentioned earlier. With NIL contracts now available, how much money do you estimate your NIL deal would have been worth as the reigning Dick Butkus and Chuck Bednarik Award winner in 2006? That's
an interesting question, and I'll tell you what, I've been removed now from it to the point where I'm not aware of the valuations that are being thrown around for those players. But I can tell you this: I do. When I was playing my senior year, it was after a game, and I think I was walking home with my family, or walking back to our dorms with my family, and a gentleman comes up to me and says, "Hey, Paul, great game, congratulations." And he almost said it like in a not condescending but laughing manner. Said, By the way, I make T-shirts, and these gray T-shirts with a blue 31 on it, my number at the time. I'd also like to say that I was just borrowing that number from Shane Conlon and Andre Collins. But he said, you do not want to know how much money I've made off of you. And I said, I was like, what do you mean? He said, and then he told me about his T-shirt business. So when you think of that and you say, oh man, I don't, it's an interesting problem to have, but yeah, the dollars being thrown around. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I've kind of lost track of who gets what now in that environment.
Yeah, I guess there's some players that are saying, I know in college basketball that they've come back another year because they'll make more playing in college than they will in the NBA. So I thought that was quite interesting.
For sure. It's going to completely change the dynamic of what it means to be a student athlete at the college level. When you think of the money being put into that environment, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Hopefully we'll find a way for it to benefit all, and it'll be good for college sports.
So I was very surprised to see that you only made the playoffs one time during your NFL career. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like and how hard it is to win games consistently in the NFL.
It's so many things have to go right to have continued success in the NFL on a team level. You have to stay healthy. You have to have a quarterback that plays well. You have to have a great defense. So when you think of all those variables that have to go right almost all the time, that's why the NFL number one is so great. Why? Because each year, it's truly any team can be in a great position to have success if all those variables end up favorable to them. Our playoff run with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2017, 2018 was such an unbelievable experience for me because it was my 11th year, and had so played a decade of football and never been to the playoffs. And that can start to wear on you. So you finally get an opportunity to go, and it was so exciting for the city of Jacksonville, so exciting for the Jaguars to be in that situation where we're competing against. We played the Buffalo Bills in our first playoff game. Then we got to go to Pittsburgh to play the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers. So what an unbelievable environment to be in. I just remember it was so exciting for our team, our organization, and really all of Northeast Florida, because the Jaguars hadn't been to the playoffs in a long time, and we finally got compete at a level where we deserve to go.
Another thing that I found very interesting when doing research for this interview was that you come from a very athletic family. Stan, your older brother, was drafted by the Seattle Mariners, and your younger brother, David, also played football at Notre Dame. I wanted to know, how did those early battles with your brothers prepare you for the challenges you face in the NFL and later on in life?
I'll tell you this. Number one, so I would say, number one, my older brother Stan is the most athletic out of the brothers. My younger brother Dave is the toughest out of the brothers. I was just fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time, and I truly believe that if I didn't have them, if I didn't have my older brother Stan, who was such a great influence on my life, and then my younger brother Dave, being in a situation where I wanted to do things right, to try to be a good role model for him, because he's 5 years younger than me. That helped me so much into collegiately and then playing in the NFL. Those my two brothers are very instrumental in the NFL career that I had. But sport, like you said, sports were a huge part of our childhood growing up. Our parents made the decision early on that we have 5 kids. We got to figure out a way to keep them busy somehow. So thankfully they got us all involved in sports, which is, looking back on it, was an absolute blessing. But you're absolutely right. Athletics are a big part of our family.
Awesome. And I guess one last question I have for you is, how did you get into what you're doing now? And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I found it quite interesting that you have ventured away from football to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, after when I finished my football career, I said, you know, I know that I want to do something else. I have a lot of other interests and nothing quite as much as I love football. But so I went to graduate school. I got an MBA from Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon, and an opportunity came up through an internship to work for Raytheon Missiles and Defense. It's a, you know, I would say the aerospace and defense industry is something that I've always had an enormous love or passion for. And this opportunity came up through an internship. And so I joined on with them. It's surrounded by outstanding people. It's you end up working with a lot of people that were former military officers or people that served, which I love because, you know, it's interesting. Some people are fans of the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New York Yankees or New York Giants. I'm a fan of the United States Marine Corps and in the U.S. Army and Navy, and I hold them in such high regard. So to be able to be associated with a company that helps provide them with what they need to ultimately to protect our country and our allies, it seemed like a great situation. So I'm way over my head, let's put it that way, from a learning perspective. But at Raytheon, you're surrounded by outstanding people that are willing to help, and the mission that we're dedicated to is a very honorable one. So it's been a great experience so far.
Awesome. I guess, do you have any advice for retired NFL players?
I'll tell you what, I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest with you, because it's such a challenge, right? You're a part of a football team, something that you love, something that you're so passionate about, and you're surrounded by guys that you view as brothers. And it's extremely hard to replicate that environment outside of football. And I know that, being able to channel that passion and that love for something into another area is so critical. I mean, I feel like the guys that have challenges are ones that are still struggling to find that path where they say, okay, I was fully dedicated and fully devoted for something for so long. What do I do now? So being able to truly look internally and say, okay, what is it that I want to dedicate my life to? And family, charitable work, working at Raytheon Missiles and Defense. So there's so many options out there. But finding that passion that you can dedicate all that love and energy to, that's the challenge for sure.